6479. An altitude reporting coded transponder is required for all airspace. A. From the surface to 10,000 feet MSL within a 10 nm radius of any airport traffic pattern. B. At and above 10,000 feet MSL and below the of Class A airspace, excluding airspace at or below 2,500 feet AGL. C. Within 25 nm of a Class B primary airport from the surface upward to 10,000 feet MSL, excluding airspace below 1,200 feet AGL. The correct answer is B. An altitude reporting coded transponder is required for all airspace at and above 10,000 feet MSL and below the floor of Class A airspace, excluding airspace at or below 2,500 feet AGL. To ensure effective air traffic control and enhance airspace safety, regulations specify the requirements for using transponders with altitude reporting capability in different airspace. These requirements help maintain proper surveillance and separation of aircraft. The correct option states that an altitude reporting coded transponder is required for all airspace at and above 10,000 feet MSL and below the floor of Class A airspace. Class A airspace typically starts at 18,000 feet MSL. However, the requirement excludes airspace at or below 2,500 feet AGL above ground level. This means that when operating in airspace at and above 10,000 feet MSL, pilots must have a functioning transponder that can transmit their aircraft's altitude information to air traffic control. This requirement is essential for proper air traffic management and the safe coordination of aircraft within this airspace. The exclusion of airspace at or below 2,500 feet AGL from this requirement recognizes that certain areas, such as remote or low-traffic regions, may not have the same surveillance needs as higher-density airspace. However, it is crucial for pilots to consult the specific regulations and any applicable local requirements to ensure compliance with transponder usage in their intended airspace. By adhering to these requirements, pilots contribute to the overall safety and efficiency of air traffic control operations and facilitate the effective coordination and separation of aircraft at higher altitudes. 6474. The primary purpose of a minimum equipment list, MEL, is to A. Provide a list of equipment that must be operational at all times on the aircraft. B. List the equipment that can be inoperative and still not affect the airworthiness of an aircraft. C. List the minimum equipment that must be installed in all aircraft as required by airworthiness directives. The correct answer is B. The primary purpose of a minimum equipment list, MEL, is to list the equipment that can be inoperative and still not affect the airworthiness of an aircraft. A minimum equipment list, MEL, is a document approved by the Aviation Authority that allows for the operation of an aircraft with certain equipment inoperative. The MEL specifies which equipment can be non-functional or inoperative while still ensuring the aircraft's continued airworthiness and safe operation. The correct option states that the primary purpose of an MEL is to list the equipment that can be inoperative without compromising the airworthiness of the aircraft. This means that the MEL identifies the specific equipment items that, if temporarily non-functional, do not pose a significant safety risk or prevent the aircraft from being operated safely. By providing this list of allowable inoperative equipment, the MEL enables operators to continue flight operations while awaiting the necessary repairs or maintenance on the affected equipment. It helps strike a balance between maintaining operational flexibility and ensuring aircraft safety. It is important for pilots and operators to consult the applicable MEL for their specific aircraft and comply with the instructions and limitations outlined therein. The MEL is a valuable tool that helps ensure safe and efficient operations by providing clear guidance on acceptable equipment configurations when certain items are temporarily inoperative. 6475. Authority for approval of a minimum equipment list, MEL, must be obtained from the A. Administrator. B. FAA District Office. C. Aircraft Manufacturer. The correct answer is B. Authority for approval of a minimum equipment list, MEL, must be obtained from the FAA District Office. The process of obtaining approval for a minimum equipment list, MEL, involves seeking authorization from the appropriate authority. The correct option states that this authority is the FAA District Office. The FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, is the regulatory body responsible for overseeing aviation safety in the United States. The district offices of the FAA are regional offices that handle various regulatory functions, including the approval of Welshman an operator or organization wishes to establish or revise a MEL for their aircraft. They must submit the proposed MEL to the FAA District Office for evaluation and approval. The District Office reviews the MEL to ensure compliance with applicable regulations and safety standards. If the proposed MEL meets the necessary criteria, the District Office grants approval for its use. It is essential for operators to work closely with the FAA District Office and follow the established procedures for obtaining MEL approval. This ensures that the MEL accurately reflects the specific aircraft's configuration and allows for the operation of the aircraft in a safe and compliant manner. By obtaining approval from the FAA District Office, operators demonstrate their commitment to maintaining the airworthiness and safety of their aircraft while accommodating certain inoperative equipment under defined conditions outlined in the approved MEL. 6476. Which action is appropriate if an aircraft, operating under FA or Part 91, and for which a master minimum equipment list has not been developed, is determined to have an inoperative instrument or of equipment that does not constitute a hazard to the aircraft? The item should be A. Removed and repaired prior to the next flight. B. Placarded, inoperative, and repaired during the next inspection. C. Deactivated and placarded, inoperative, but repairs can be deferred indefinitely. The correct answer is C. If an aircraft operating under FA or Part 91, for which a master minimum equipment list, MEL, has not been developed, is determined to have an inoperative instrument or equipment that does not constitute a hazard to the aircraft, the item should be deactivated and placarded as inoperative, but repairs can be deferred indefinitely. In the absence of an approved MEL, FA or Part 91 provides guidance on how to handle inoperative equipment that does not pose a hazard to the aircraft's safe operation. The correct option states that in such cases, the item should be deactivated and placarded as inoperative. This alerts the flight crew and maintenance personnel to the status of the equipment. However, what sets this option apart is that repairs can be deferred indefinitely. This means that the repair of the inoperative item can be delayed until a more convenient time or until the aircraft undergoes its next scheduled inspection or maintenance event. It is important to note that the equipment in question must not constitute a hazard to the safe operation of the aircraft for this option to be applicable. Deactivating and placarding the inoperative item ensures that all personnel involved in the operation and maintenance of the aircraft are aware of its status. It also helps prevent any potential confusion or misuse of the equipment during flight or subsequent maintenance procedures. While deferring the repair is permitted, it is still advisable to address the issue at the earliest opportunity to maintain the aircraft's overall functionality and airworthiness. Deferring repairs indefinitely should not be done if it compromises the safety of the aircraft or violates any specific regulations or airworthiness requirements for the equipment in question. 6473. Which cabin pressure altitude allows a pilot to operate an aircraft up to 30 minutes without supplemental oxygen? A. 12,500 feet MSL. B. 12,600 feet MSL. C. 14,100 feet MSL. The correct answer is B. A cabin pressure altitude of 12,600 feet MSL allows a pilot to operate an aircraft for up to 30 minutes without supplemental oxygen. When operating an aircraft at high altitudes, it is important to consider the cabin pressure altitude and the availability of supplemental oxygen for the occupants. The correct option states that at a cabin pressure altitude of 12,600 feet MSL, mean sea level, a pilot can operate the aircraft for up to 30 minutes without the need for supplemental oxygen. The reason for this limitation is to ensure that pilots have access to sufficient oxygen to maintain their cognitive function and performance during flight. At higher altitudes, the air becomes thinner, resulting in reduced oxygen levels. As a result, the body's oxygen saturation decreases, increasing the risk of hypoxia. By specifying the maximum cabin pressure altitude of 12,600 feet MSL for the 30-minute duration, regulations provide a threshold where pilots can safely operate without supplemental oxygen. However, it is important to note that this is a time-limited exception, and beyond the specified duration, pilots and occupants must have access to supplemental oxygen to ensure their safety and well-being. Pilots should be aware of the cabin pressure altitude during flight planning and continuously monitor it during the flight. Adhering to these regulations helps ensure the safety of the flight and the well-being of everyone on board.